Chapter 21 Daddy or Super Daddy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Daddy, after amusement park, let's go to a big hotel as well. Hearing his question, Ely raised her flat chest and spoke. I tried to stop her but she didn't listen. Charlotte embarrassedly answered. In fact, she felt guilty because this was her plan. And she planned it with Ely. She was surprised that Ely agreed so easily. But then again, she remembered Ely had lived her life as a rich brat. Alright then. What else can he say? Brian had no idea that Ely was interested in going to the high-class hotel, but considering her previous life, it made sense to him. Oh wait, I will grab my credit card. Charlotte suddenly realized that a high-class hotel costs a fortune and turned around. She couldn't even think of spending Brian's money, especially now that he didn't even have a proper job. Don't worry, I got this. Brian didn't want her to spend as well since he already had a lot of money. And, making his lover spend on their first date was even more unacceptable. Yes, you don't have to worry. Daddy worked in UMA. I am pretty sure they had given him a lot of money. Ely proudly nodded her head and ran towards Brian, jumping into his embrace. He caught her but her dress made it harder to hold her properly. So, did you also hack my bank account? Brian asked with a smile on his face. Of course, he knew that is pretty much impossible. No. Actually, I couldn't see how much they pay Daddy. Daddy, why wasn't your name on the list of payments made by UMA to its staff? It was weird. How much did you earn? Ely asked as she closely remembered the entire list of people who were UMA's staff. You want to know your daddy's bank account so that you can make his wallet empty. Brian looked at her and joked as he walked out of the door. Charlotte closely followed them, and just when she tried to lock it, she found it was already locked. 0. Only then did she remember the house assistants that Brian builds for his house. She smiled and caught up to Brian, walking next to him. Daddy, please tell me. Tell me. Tell me. Tell me. Ely started screaming in his ears and finally, it started irritating him. He sighed and said, I have 1/100th of your mother's net worth. Are you satisfied now? Hearing his words, Ely counted her fingers as she muttered, Mother's net worth is 100 billion if I don't include the family property. Does this mean Daddy's new worth is $1 billion? Wow. Daddy, you are so rich. Although $1 billion wasn't a lot of her since she played with tens of hundreds of billions of dollars, it wasn't low at all. Next to her, Charlotte opened her mouth so wide that Brian's hand can enter it. She suddenly lowered her head with a gloomy expression. His net worth is $1 billion. How? How did he earn so much in just 2 years? Why did UMA pay him so much? Suddenly, her net worth of $70,000 appeared on her mind and she got frustrated. Her enemy had billions of dollars as her own net worth while she only had a few thousand. But, she suddenly froze. Oh. She noticed her hand was caught by Brian's hand. She raised her head and looked at him. At this moment, Ely was staring at another side. He slightly leaned near her and whispered, From now on, my money is your money. So, don't look sad. It doesn't suit you. Hearing his words, she felt warm inside her heart. She puts her arm around his arm and puts her head on his shoulder. But, the next moment, she felt something poking her head. Show. Daddy's shoulder isn't for you. It is reserved for Mommy. How can you be so shameless? It was none other than Ely. She was poking her head and pushing her away. Unfortunately, Charlotte was strong enough that it didn't even budge her. It's okay, Ely. She had to give you her blood. Now, she is feeling a little weak. Let her rest. Brian stopped Ely from disturbing Charlotte. He couldn't tell her about their relationship. But, he didn't want to make Charlotte feel alone as well. So, he had to do everything even lie. TCH. She is a 4th rank werewolf and she got tried because of that. She is too weak. My mommy is 1,000 times stronger than her. Ely wasn't satisfied but she didn't rebel as well. She only insulted her while pouting with a cute expression. Hearing those words, Charlotte bites her lips. Compared to her, she was truly weak, so weak that it might be impossible to compare. Ely, how about we play a game? Brian spoke, which made her raise her head. Ely also looked at him with surprise. Game. Here. Ely looked at her daddy with confusion and asked. Yes. This game is pretty simple. If you stop bickering with Sister Charlotte, I will let you play all of the rides inside the amusement park. Brian nodded his head and explained. Hearing the game, Ely looked at him suspiciously, but the next moment, she raised both of her hands and shouted. Yay! Thank you, Daddy. She wrapped her hands around his neck and kissed his cheek. Oh, you are celebrating like you already won. Are you so confident? Brian looked at her and asked. Hee. I didn't want to talk to her. And now, I get a reward for it. So, of course, I am confident. Ely's attitude towards Charlotte was very cold, but both of them had no choice but to adjust. Brian obviously didn't want to make Ely sad and Charlotte didn't want that either. Soon, they reached the train station, and as they expected it was quite packed. The amusement park was in the Zone D. 3 of them sat on the train and as Brian expected, everyone was looking at them, especially the girls. Their dresses were truly high class. Knowing this, Brian bitterly smiled and just waited. Many people could still see Charlotte's ears, so they were quite surprised to see the relationship between humans and werewolves. It was like porn. It is something that everyone knows of but still feels awkward to watch in the public. After half an hour, they finally reached their destination. It was quite far, but the train was very fast. Even though this was the age of superheroes, technology was advancing even faster than before. Brian understands this more than anyone else. Daddy, why don't we have a car or helicopter? Getting stared at by so many people made Ely uncomfortable. She looked at Brian and asked with a sad tone. Brian looked at her with surprise as they got out of the train and walked straight towards the amusement park. Brian had memorized the map in his mind. He looked at Ely and said, because Daddy didn't need a car or helicopter before. But now that Ely is going to live with Daddy, I will buy one tomorrow. Yay! We don't have to travel on a train after that. Ely raised her hands with a sweet smile on her face. She was still in his arms. But, do we really need such things? I mean, it's not like we would go out like this every single day. Charlotte, on the other hand, didn't like the idea of spending money. She was very conservation about money. Ely opened her mouth, but she quickly remembered something and shuts her mouth. She turned around and snorted. Don't worry, it's just a car. I can afford it. Brian smiled at Charlotte and answered. Charlotte tried to speak, but Brian quickly replied, from now on, don't worry about money. Remember, I don't care much you spend, we will never run out of money. Not with me at least. Brian wasn't concerned about money. For him, money was never a concern at all. If he wants, he can even become the richest man in the entire world in a few years. Of course, he wasn't interested in being one. He was interested in being the strongest, not the richest. Hearing his words, Charlotte looked at him with a confused look. She knew Brian wasn't poor, but promising something like never running out of money was very strange to her. It seems there are many things that I don't know about. With that much confidence in his tone, I can deduce that he had something to back up his words. It wasn't ignorance, since he knows how rich that woman is. I really need to pick up the gear. I must find out more about him. Only then do I get closer to him and be more useful to him. In this world, there is no such thing as a normal housewife. I need to get stronger. Wow. Is it really true, Daddy? Can you really buy everything? I can't believe Brian lied to us. He has no money at all. Give him your power stones so that they can exchange power stones for money. We can't allow him to ruin Ely's princess life. Chapter 22 Daddy helped his friend. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ah. Can we discuss this later? People are watching. Brian puts his finger on her lips and stopped her from taking it. Everyone around them started staring at them with a weird gaze. Even Brian was a little embarrassed by this. Hee hee. On other hand, Charlotte giggled seeing his embarrassed look. But, the next moment, she suddenly collided with someone. Thud. The man in front of her fell to the ground. She hurriedly bowed a little and said, "Sir, I am sorry. I didn't see you coming." Humph. Watch your steps next time. The man was wearing a brown hat and a brown coat. He hid his face well with the hat and snorted at her while standing. But just when he walked away, Brian caught his hand. Brian looked straight at his head and said, "Sir, would you mind returning her purse?" What? My purse. Only then did Charlotte recognize that she had lost her purse. Go away. The man shook away Brian's hand easily and ran away, but the next moment, a shadow dashed in front of him. Do you think you can outrun a werewolf? Charlotte knuckled her fist and punched his face. Thud. The man fell to the ground and her purse fell down from his coat. 0. Whoa. She was really a werewolf. Dad, look, she is super strong. Suddenly, a little girl whose hand was held by a middle-aged man shouted while pointing at Charlotte. Lily, don't point fingers at others. Her dad put down her hand and walked toward Charlotte. He looked at her and said, "Isn't it a little too heavy for him? No matter what, he is still a normal human." Normal? I don't think so. Suddenly, Brian spoke from behind. How could you say? Looking at the man who passed out, the middle-aged man looked at Brian and asked, frowning. Oh, Brian crouched down and picked up his hand. There was a watch with a touch screen on it. GW. Model 546. It is a special watch only worn by rankers. This watch allows them to track down the dungeons and portals that open up and also allows them to communicate with other superheroes. From the looks of it, he isn't a ranker, or else he wouldn't go around stealing from them. Since he has it, it means he stole it from someone. Saying so, Brian clicked the screen a few times and suddenly two small boards came out of the sides. Whoosh! The next moment, a powerful but tiny thruster shot down at the ground, and the watch flew away. Oh! Where is it going? The middle-aged man was satisfied with his explanation but still didn't understand how the watch was able to fly. But, instead of asking such a question, he asked about the watch's target since it would be made it easier for him to understand Brian's intention. To its rightful owner. A self-tracking mechanism is designed in the watch so that it can fly off to any contact or the owner of the watch. I will leave this guy in your hands. Brian turned around and picked up Ely in his arms, smiling. General Troy. When the middle-aged man heard his name, his eyes shrunk, but just when he tried to speak, Charlotte held his shoulder and smirked with a dark expression. Shouldn't you give more time to your lady and not bother our date? Hearing her words, Troy pulled down his hand and turned around. Sorry, but it seems like we will be sticking together for a while. Saying so, he took out 3 golden tickets from his pocket. Charlotte immediately ignored him and caught up to Brian. A lady wearing a gray skirt and gray coat with brown hair walked up to Troy and asked, "Are we really going to waste our time on him?" Troy shook his head and crouched down. He touched the chest of this man and 2 metallic chains came out of his hand, covering his body. After chaining him, Troy stood up and took out his phone. I marked a location. Come to this location and take the guy chained with my chains. Yes, General. Then, Troy puts back his phone and looked at his wife. We should enjoy our family time without disturbance, shouldn't we? O.org. His wife looked at him with a bright smile on her face and pulled her daughter in her arms. Lily looked at her father and asked with confusion. Daddy, who was that person? Was he your friend? Troy shook his head and smiled. It seems like your daddy is more famous than he thought. Hee. Hearing those words, his wife giggled as they walked toward the amusement park. Hey, what's with that laugh? I am famous. Troy spoke to his wife while taking Lily from her arms. Then, he let her hold his arm. Troy looked straight and saw Brain and his family several meters away from him. I feel like I met him somewhere, but why is he here? UMA technical department, especially those who are involved in that project, do not get to leave. Troy shook his head and finally stopped thinking too much. In front of him, Brian and his little family were having a talk while walking. How did you know that he stole my purse? My senses didn't catch anything. Charlotte was truly surprised. As a werewolf, she had a keen sense, but she didn't expect to get tricked so easily. Brian turned his eyes at her and spoke. In a game, there is a class called Bandit. They are like a thief version of assassins. They have a special stat called Silence. It allows them to make their target completely blind from their senses perspective. Well, this class was a bad class, but it was created to maintain balance with Monk class. While bandits steal and plunder, Monk does not even kill, giving them a righteous stat. As their righteous stat increases, their strength in the moment of a battle can increase. Of course, they will lose it as soon as they do something that society perceives as a bad thing. Oh. I didn't expect that game to have such a class. But wait, what does this has to do with you? I mean, even my senses were down, so how did you find out? Charlotte nodded her head with understanding, but she didn't get her answer. So, she immediately asked again. How do I say this? That watch told me. Brian spoke, but when she heard him, she stopped walking. For a moment, she couldn't process his words, but until then Brian had already escaped far away. After a while, she realized that Brian had already reached far away, and she immediately dashed towards him, shouting. Hey, wait, I don't understand what you mean. Sigh. I grind the hordes of monsters for an entire night to reach level 10 and finally became the first-rank superhero, just to lose my watch. Arg. It sucks. A young man in his 20s grunted with frustration while staring at the sky. He was walking down the street while grunting with frustration. When he shouted, the people around looked at him with strange eyes. Hey George, what's up with your mood? Shouldn't you be happy for reaching the first rank in 3 days? A girl wearing a hoodie and a tracksuit appeared behind him and spoke. She had glasses on her eyes with her black hair covered with a hood. She had a lollipop in her mouth. Arg. I just got my superhero license and the gear, which included the special watch made by Golden Wing Industry. But, some insane thief stole it from me. Now, I can't even find it. George had a tall but buffed body just like Brian. He was wearing a black coat and black pants with black shoes, like a true gentleman. Can't you report it to the UMA branch office? I am sure they can track it unless that thief is smart enough to turn off the special tracker of that watch. The girl looked at him and answered. When George heard her words, his eyes widened. Ah! How come I didn't think of that? Thank you so much, Shirley. George shook her shoulder and bowed in order to show his gratitude. He immediately turned around, but just when he was about to run, a watch floated in front of him. I think I read this somewhere. It is said that Golden Wing has inserted a self-tracking system in their high-end model watches which allows superheroes to send or receive the watch from any place they want. I didn't expect it to be true. But, they won't fly unless they are taken out of someone's wrist and personally activated. Which means someone who sent this to you hacked into this watch in case you did put security. So, did you? Shirley asked with doubts in her mind. Yes, I did put a lock and look. Not only did this person send me the watch but also wrote a message. Look. George shook his hand in front of her. Shirley also curiously stared down at the watch and read the message. Congratulations on becoming a superhero, George. Hard work always pays off. Chapter 23 Ely made her first friend. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Woo. Ah. You. 3 different screams rang out from the first seat of the roller coaster. 3 people were none other than Brian, Charlotte, and Ely. I thought children aren't allowed to come here. So, why are we playing this with her? Charlotte screamed while looking at Brian. Ely was sitting in the middle while they were on the left and right. I don't know. This roller coaster allows children if they don't fear it. Brian said while looking at Ely, who seemed to laughing and enjoying this roller coaster. On other hand, it was Charlotte who was screaming out loud. Unlike a normal roller coaster, this was not just faster but also for a long time. Charlotte almost passed out. Brian felt guilty for making her take a ride while Ely was enjoying it. After it stopped, all 3 of them got off their seat and walked away. As they walked away, a little girl pointed her finger at them and said, "Daddy, I also want to ride that." Hearing his daughter's request, Troy looked at the roller coaster and said, "Lily, this isn't something you can ride. You won't be able to stay conscious." Then, why doesn't she feel anything? Are you saying that I am weaker than her? Daddy, you don't trust your daughter. Lily instantly made teary eyes as she jumped into her mommy's legs and started crying. 0. Dear, your father and mother are humans while her mother isn't. She must have inherited some incredible strength from birth. If you ride that roller coaster, you will puke and fall unconscious. Then, not only you won't be able to enjoy it, but if someone from your school sees it, then they will also make fun of you. So, let's not play that, okay? Look, now she is going to play bumper cars. How about you play with her and make friends with her? Troy's wife patted her head and spoke with a gentle smile on her face. Really? Lily wiped away her tears and looked at her mommy's face with bright eyes. Yeah. You should make friends with her. Her mother nodded her head and answered. Hooray! I will. Lily raised both of her hands cheering, and ran away. Hee hee. Hopefully, that girl won't be hard to talk to. Troy's wife giggled and spoke, but she noticed a serious look on her husband's face. She frowned and asked. What happened? Peggy, tell me something. A small kid, no matter how angry she might get, she will try to get in her mother's embrace, right? Troy asked while staring at the bumper cars. Now that you mentioned it, she has never even talked with that lady. And, those 2 seem awkward in many common interactions. Did your detective eyes catch something? Peggy asked as she puts her hand on her chin. Oh. I don't believe in it, but after seeing him who isn't supposed to be here, I feel like I can add something to this puzzle. Red eyes and silver hair aren't that rare, but together, they can only be found in one family. And, even in that family, only one person has silver hair and red eyes. Normally, I wouldn't compare this girl to her, but when I think about it, the more sense it starts to make. This little girl seems to be 7 or 8 years old. And, exactly 8 years ago, she changed her title from Blood Princess to Blood Queen. And, you couldn't find this little girl's identity in UMA General Information Center as well. Don't you find it suspicious? Troy asked as he deeply analyzed her situation. It's not about suspicion. The questions would be why the strongest creature on the earth would bear the child of a human, and a normal human nonetheless. Peggy shook her head and asked while looking at him with eyebrows narrowing. Normal human. Do you think a normal human would be able to find the movement of a rank 1 ranker, especially a ranker with bandit class? Peggy, I think this little tour of ours will be much more interesting. Troy smirked and took a step forward. Peggy hurriedly followed him while shaking her with a smile. She quickly reached near him and closed her arm around his, while placing her head on his shoulder. She doesn't care about Brian or Ely. She just wants to spend her spare time with her husband. Troy glanced at his wife and sighed. He decided not to focus too much on Brian. After all, he came here just for his wife and daughter. And, he and his wife had to finish their work in advance just to take a day off. General Troy/Detective Troy is one of the most prominent members of UMA and is currently in the 6th rank superhero ranking. He was a detective before awakening his superpowers and it only enhanced his detective skills. Peggy Carter, wife of Troy Carter and mother of Lily Carter. She is currently the head of the UMA Intelligence Office. Unlike Troy, she is only responsible for managing information of the entire UMA except for some secretive information that is only hidden by some higher-level members. Brian's information was also hidden there. So, she couldn't find it. She only knew his fake information while working as an interim in technical department. While they were walking towards the bumper cars, their daughter had already started a conversation with Ely. "Hello friend, my name is Lily. Do you want to play together?" Lily tried to be as formal as she could be. She also extended her hand for a handshake. That's what her mother taught her. But Ely was a little confused with such behavior. There were only two kinds of attitudes toward her. One is filled with warmth and love while another is filled with coldness and hate. But, Lily's tone was in the middle. She was neither overly friendly nor completely unfriendly, which caught her completely off guard. "Ahem. Shouldn't you say hello to your new friend, Ely?" Brian cleared his throat and asked. Ely raised her head with hesitation and looked at him. Brian smiled and nodded his head. Ely bites her lips and shook her hand while speaking. My name is Eleanor Jackson. Nice to meet you." Her voice shuddered at first but she quickly controlled it. She was saying her mother's surname but she quickly realized the consequences of her identity being leaked and used her father's surname. "How old are you, Eleanor?" Lily smiled and asked. "I am 8 years old." Ely finally calmed down and replied, but she still couldn't properly smile. "Really? I am 10 years old. Do you know what it means?" Lily giggled and asked with a great urge to answer it right now. Ely shook her head and Lily jumped and patted Ely's shoulder saying, "Since we are going to be friends and you are younger than me, then your trouble is my trouble. If anyone bullies you, then you can tell me. I will smash their head. By the way, which school do you go to?" "School? I don't go to school." Ely shook her head and replied. But her reply made Lily confused. She looked at Brian and asked, "Your daddy looks rich. So, why aren't you going to school?" "Ahem. Little girl, Ely has a small problem. So, she is homeschooled. And, I feel like she can learn a lot better at home than at school." Brian saw Ely's awkward and sad face. He immediately decided to interfere. "But, Mr. Brian, school isn't just for knowledge. It is also an opportunity for a child to get accustomed to new friends and teachers. It is also about the experience. I think you should let her join the school." Suddenly, a voice rang from behind which belonged to none other than Troy. Hearing his words, Brian smiled and nodded. "It seems General has already investigated me. Anyway, nice to meet you. My name is Brian Jackson." Saying so, Brian extended his hand and Troy replied with a handshake. "Oh, my name is Troy Carter. Nice to meet you. And, this is my wife Peggy Carter. As for our daughter, you have already met her." Peggy smiled and nodded at him. Troy and Peggy turned their heads at Charlotte, who was standing there silently. When she got their gazes, she smiled and opened her mouth. "My name is Charlotte Edith." Hearing her introduction, Troy and Peggy looked at each other but they didn't continue to prey on it. "Mr. Brian, My daughter is studying in a school where I can help your daughter enter without any qualification. It would be a little high on a budget, but if you can manage it, then it would be a perfect school for your daughter. She would not only be trained as a student but also future ranker. So, what do you think? Troy distracted himself from Charlotte and looked at Brian, asking him. Brian smiled and replied, "Sorry General Troy, but I can't come to the conclusion right now. How about I give you a call later?" "Of course. Here is my number. Anyway, since we have come here, why not enjoy it more?" Troy smiled and gave him his number while pointing his finger at another amazing ride. Chapter 24 Daddy Saves the Day. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While two little girls started playing on their own, four of them enjoyed some other rides. Of course, they couldn't leave two girls away from their sight, especially inside amusement park. So, they placed a tracker on them before letting them have fun on their own. "So, what should we play?" Troy looked at the bunch of different rides and asked. "How about we go for that one?" Brian pointed at the swing ride and asked. "Good idea." Both of them agreed without even asking their respected wife/girlfriend. Peggy and Charlotte didn't make any scene and chased after them. One after another, they tested different rides and finally met their children as well. But, there was one more ride remaining. For this ride, Brian and Troy let their daughters enjoy it first since there were no more seats left for all six of them. Although two more people could go, they decided to wait since their daughter could try other rides while they waited from the ground. "Oh! Help!" Suddenly, a loud voice rang from behind which stunned four of them. They turned around and saw a group of monsters coming out of a portal. Instant portal. Damn it! There are too many people here. Troy cursed when he saw the portal. He looked around and saw many people running away from those monsters. These monsters were goblins but not normal goblins. They have evolved versions known as Berserk Goblin, known for their dark red skin. Whoosh! Bang! Thud! Thud! Without wasting any seconds, Troy dashed towards the Berserk Goblin and released a chain from his hand, wrapping it around the goblin's neck. Then, he pulled the chain and smashed the goblin on the ground a few times. 0. "Peggy, take the people away from here." Troy turned around and shouted while releasing dozens of chains from his hand. Each chain wrapped around the goblin's neck as he stopped their movement. Peggy suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of a group of people. She touched those people and once again disappeared. Her powers were teleportation, allowing her to teleport within a certain range. "Charlotte, go and help him." "I will help other people." Brian shouted at Charlotte while running towards the people. He had a little bit of mana and a little bit of physical strength than most people, but that's it. He doesn't have the power to face the Berserk Goblins. Charlotte looked a little surprised when she heard him. But, when she turned her head and looked at Troy, she found that he wasn't moving. He was trying everything just to keep them in place, and by each second, he was getting pulled near them. Gur! She immediately realized the situation and spread out her hands. Strange energy appeared on her fingers and took the shape of her nails, just a lot longer. Her face also changed a little bit as her teeth elongated. Whoosh! Bang! Her body dashed towards the goblin as if she was the wind. She decreased the size of her energy nail and clenched her fist. As soon as she reached the goblin, she punched with all of her strength. Troy instantly released the chain and the goblin flew out, but she quickly chased after it. Splash! Before it could fall to the ground, she opened her hand and her nails elongated once again. She stretched out her hand and slashed her nails at the chest of the goblin. The red blood spilled on her hand and the goblin fell to the ground, covered in its own blood. Oh! Gur! She turned around her and her expression turned savage. She was literally roaring like a wolf. Without hesitating, she instantly dashed towards the next goblin. While she was fighting, Brian was helping the people get away from the portals. Many of them were children, so he had to move fast. He was literally carrying them away from the scene. Bang! But, quickly he noticed something that widened his eyes. One of the goblins broke the control room of the Ferris wheel and it was now unable to stop. As soon as he saw that, he shouted, "Charlotte!" His voice was quite loud. As soon as she heard him, her eyes followed his gaze and saw the goblin near the control. She immediately understood his intention and dashed towards that goblin. But, this time the goblin noticed her in the middle and immediately turned at her. It raised its fist and shot a punch at her. But, instead of colliding with its fist, she stopped in front of it and held its hand with both of her hands. Whoosh! Thud! Then, she swung its body and threw it away from the control room. A few seconds later, Brian reached in front of the control room. "Can we stop it?" Charlotte turned her head to Brian and asked. "Let me check." Brian immediately dashes in front of the computer and puts his hand on the cable. He could find the damage on the controller. So, he got no choice but to use the computer to stop it. "Come on. Tell me the way." Currently, every modern ride from the amusement park is connected to the one main system. Only a few people in the company who made these rides have the code. That means I got no choice but to hack into their system. Although the motors connected to the wheel are used in a traditional way, each of them also has a processor chip connected to the main system. So, I just have to hack the system and stop the wheel. Brian turned his head at Charlotte and said, "Give me 5 minutes. Hold the monsters until then." Charlotte nodded her head and walked out of the control room. "Oh, what happened? Can he stop it?" Troy immediately arrives in front of her and asked with an anxious expression. Charlotte nodded her head and said, "We have to buy him some time." "All right. Let's do our best." Troy nodded his head and turned his head at the berserk goblins that kept coming out of the portal. Suddenly, Peggy also appeared next to him. "Did you finish teleporting everyone?" Troy immediately asked. "I never do my job half baked. By the way, I think I can teleport to the wheel and bring everyone down," Peggy said as she looked at the Ferris wheel and the people who were shouting out from it. Even Lily was terrified, but Ely was still calm enough. "Ely, what should we do? Mommy isn't coming for us. Can't she come here?" Lily looked at Ely with teary eyes and asked. "Don't worry, they will definitely find a way. For now, we should stay calm." Ely patted Lily's shoulder and made her sit back. "Why aren't you terrified of this?" Lily noticed that Ely wasn't even feeling scared. She didn't understand it. "Because I believe in my daddy." Ely proudly patted her chest and spoke. When Lily heard it, she suddenly stopped tearing up. She looked at Ely's red eyes and nodded her head. "Yeah, I should believe in my mommy as well." Normally, her mother would save her first in any situation. But this time she didn't even come for so long, which made her more and more terrified. "No, you shouldn't do that. When the controller broke, it completely locked the doors. That means even if you teleport, you won't be able to teleport inside." Brian's voice came from inside as he was intensely clicking the keys on the keyboard. "Yeah, he is right. You can't teleport inside them since they are made with special materials to prevent any spatial activity. For now, let's just trust him." Troy nodded his head and convinced his wife as he slammed his chains against the goblins. Roar! But, the goblin filled with rage caught his chains. Berserk Goblin increases their strength with their rage. After it caught his chain, Troy narrowed his eyes and a cold smirk appeared on his lips. Splash! The next moment, sharp spikes came out of his chain that pierced the goblin's hand. It immediately lets go of that chain, which gives Troy enough time to swing it with all his strength. His chain cut through the goblin, leaving it in a pool of blood. "Damn! I got inside the system, but the power isn't enough." The motors have a backup battery that keeps them spinning. It was created in case the power runs out in the middle, but now isn't enough. Not only do I need to stop it like normal but also open the door, which means it needs enough power. There must be a power cut, right? Brian instantly left the keyboard and looked around. His eyes fell on the big wire which was torn in half. He smiled and immediately grabbed two parts of the wire. But, at the same time, he heard Charlotte's voice. "Brian, look out." His instinct asked him to turn around. In front of him, a goblin burst inside from the other side and slammed a massive wooden weapon. But before it could hit him, Brian released a little bit of mana that he had and coated his fist. Zzzzzzzzz, thud. Thud. He slammed both open sides of the wires on the side of the goblin's heads. The electricity slammed the goblin against the wall, but the electricity also tore his mana and struck him to the ground. Ugh! Did those two sides touch? Brian moved his head barely to the side and saw the power flowing into the circuit. He tried to raise his body, but the impact had left him on the ground, unable to move. He gritted his teeth and looked at the computer. He just needed to click once on the monitor. Do it. Two words escaped his mouth as his eyes slowly closed. Chapter 25. Daddy figured out everything. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Arg! Brian slowly opened his eyes while his head was on Charlotte's lap. He looked at her and asked, "How long was I out for?" "Just 5 minutes. Charlotte smiled and answered. When she got inside, she found him on the ground, but just when she thought the job wasn't done, the Ferris wheel stopped and the ones who were at the bottom came out. Slowly, it operated on its own until everyone came out. Only then did it finally stop. She was thankful that Brian did his job before passing out. Unfortunately, only Brian knew what truly happened. It was something he doesn't mind sharing, but he doesn't know how to explain it. Since he knows this isn't just a superpower. It's like a connection between him and technologies. He can't control technology, but he can communicate with it. This is his inborn ability, which also gave him a successful career as a programmer. After all, when it comes down to programming, the most important aspects are knowledge and experience. There is no such thing as talent. But, this ability of his allows him to go further. To be specific, the technologies showed him the possibilities and the path which he keeps on walking. He sighed just thinking about it. If it wasn't for this ability, he wouldn't have saved those people stuck on Ferris wheel so quickly. Daddy! Daddy! Arg! Suddenly, Ely rushed toward him, running and jumping on his stomach. Brian's head jolted up and his lips touched Charlotte's lips, which shocked both of them. But, his head returned back to her lap the next moment. 0. Daddy, you are finally awake. I was so worried. Ely wrapped her hands around his neck and almost bursts into tears. Hearing her words, Brian instantly forgot what just happened and patted her head. Oh, it's okay. I am all right, aren't I? But if you keep sitting on me, I might not remain okay. Ely wasn't that heavy, but his body was feeling incredibly weak at this moment. Sorry, Daddy. Ely apologized and immediately got off his chest. So, you are finally awake. Do you mind if we talk a little? Troy suddenly approached him and asked. Then, he quickly stared at Ely while signaling Brian. Brian sighed and spoke. Ely, can you go and play with your new friend for a while? Daddy has something important to talk about. All right. Ely nodded her head with a smile and immediately rushed toward Lily with a cheerful smile on her face. Lily, let's play hide and seek. So what do you want to talk about? Brian stared at Troy in a serious mood and spoke. Oh. Troy didn't speak but rather took out a tablet and showed a picture to him. In the picture, there were nearly 18 red dots on the map of the Earth. Seeing this, Brian's eyes widened as he turned to Troy and asked, "Is this real?" Troy nodded his head and Charlotte asked with a curious expression. "What do these dots represent?" Brian sighed as he returned the tablet to Troy and spoke. Spontaneous dungeons. These kinds of dungeons are rare. Up until now, the highest record of spontaneous dungeons occurring at the same time is only 4. But this time, there are 18 dungeons spontaneously appearing out of nowhere and with no prior notice. Normally, whenever a dungeon appears, a huge wave of zero-point energy erupts at that exact place, condensing a portal and an entire landscape as well. These landscapes are generally covered and look like caves, holding hundreds of monsters, which is why we call them dungeons. Originally, vampires and werewolves had no relationship with Earth, but because of the solar flare that awakened Earth and gave some Earthlings superpower alongside an immense amount of zero-point energy which is normally present in the vacuum of space, they invaded us. You know the rest. Vampires and werewolves fought against humans, but because of their own pride and greed, they also took down each other. Thankfully, humans had awakened those top 10 superheroes who could end the powerful vampires and werewolves at the cost of their own life. We managed to survive. Of course, even normal vampires and werewolves are stronger than humans, but are they stronger than nukes? Our world has technologically advanced enough to threaten the middle-range vampires and werewolves with nukes. That's how UMA was formed. It was actually formed to raincheck on other races and maintain the balance in power. This is why there are so many restrictions in the game. Otherwise, do you really think humans would have just restricted themselves when they had the opportunity to grow? Of course, New Gods wasn't created for humans alone, but because of vampires and werewolves' pride, most of the players in New Gods are humans. Except for these 3 powers, there is another force that UMA can't ignore. It is the force that exists beyond Earth, on the outer space of the cosmos. Of course, that is very far, and if we can't face the current problem, we won't be able to face the future. Saying so, Brian turned his head to Troy and asked, what did UMA decide to do? Nothing for now. They aren't sure whether to deploy all of our forces in some coincidental incident. Troy shook his head and answered, but suddenly, Brian grabbed his collar and shouted. What do you mean coincidental? This was a well-thought planned attack. Can't you see the clues? Have the UMA gotten so bad that they are ignoring the threat that lies in front of them? Hearing his words, Troy looked at Brian's angry expression with a slight confusion on his face. Calm down, Brian. You are still injured. Charlotte was also surprised by his reaction. She pulled him down on her lap once again. But, Brian raised his upper body and stared at Troy. Do you have any clues? Because the headquarters didn't find any. If you have any clue, please tell me, and I will inform the headquarters. Ugh. Just how bad have they gotten? Brian clenched his head and turned his head to Charlotte. Do you still have those sunglasses? Charlotte nodded her head and took out his sunglasses from her purse. It was surprising, but just before they left, Brian asked her to keep it in her purse in case he might need it. But, she only thought of this as an accessory. Brian took the glasses and wore them. His hand moved and clicked on the side of his glasses. Suddenly, a virtual projection appeared in front of them. Lily, show the Project SD, recent theory. Wait, you named your AI after my daughter's name. When he called out Lily, Troy got annoyed and shouted at him. There are approximately 57 people with this name. Are you saying that they all stole this name from you? Brian looked at him with an annoyed expression and asked. Hearing his words, Troy realized his mistake and rubbed his head embarrassedly. No, I guess. Whoa. Is this the project that you are working on? Charlotte pointed at the map with 18 blue dots and 18 red dots. Do I look like someone who would waste his time on this useless project? Brian gave her a strange glare and asked. N.N.O., I guess. Charlotte got embarrassed and lowered her head. This is one of the primary functions of Lily. She can gather all of the data from UMA's satellite and figure out everyone on her own. You can say that she is a self-developing AI. Of course, I have put some restrictions on her, but she is more capable than hundreds of AIs developed in the different corners of the world. Brian answered with a sigh. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, not in the slightest. And, you are telling this so openly? Troy looked at Brian with suspicious eyes and asked. Brian looked at him and spoke, General Troy, 6th ranker superhero, superpowers chain creation and manipulation. You have taken such a one-way usable superpower into something more capable. You are currently the best investigator that UMA can offer, especially with your ruthless tortures. It is said that there is no one who has ever succeeded to keep his mouth silent in front of you. Then, there is your wife. Peggy Carter, the head of the information team. With your help, she has almost every bit of information that her rank can hold. There are still too many things that she can't learn, not with her authority at least. But for someone with such high investigation skill, do you think I don't know about your suspicion and your investigations during this day? Well, in any case, it doesn't matter. You can't find me in the UMA with your rank. So, let's talk about the current problem, shall we? Hearing Brian's words, Troy clenched his fist, but he quickly calmed down and nodded his head. Charlotte had already clenched her fist as well, especially when she saw him doing so. Brian turned his head at the projection and said, this wasn't a coincidental attack. It was a well-thought-out plan with a well-thought-out techniques. General Troy, can you tell me what you in this map? Hearing his question, Troy gave a serious stare at the map. After a few seconds, his eyes widened as he looked at Troy. Is this even possible? Thanks for reading the chapter. I hope you are enjoying the series. Vote with Power Stones and Golden Tickets once the option is available. This book really needs your support, so support in any way you can. Chapter 26 Daddy's Project for Ely. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yeah, for the past year, these spontaneous dungeons are appearing in a pattern, specifically where we expect them the least. Not only they are anticipating our moves, but they are also trying to stay one step ahead of us. I don't think the difficulty that we faced is the same as the difficulty that some of the other places like the 8th and 12th faced. Because that place is closer to the UMA office, heroes are mostly present there. But, this is an amusement park, and without any signs of monsters appearing here before, there are no superheroes here. It is a perfect opportunity to strike. And, they are using this opportunity perfectly. Those 18 blue dots are their previous locations, and for a year, they have been appearing in this pattern in order to do something big. If I am not wrong, then they have learned a way to send armies in a tactical way rather than in a berserk way. Just imagine how many people can they kill and eat if they just know where to attack. Living within 0 point energy, we have consumed a lot of it. Of course, it doesn't do anything to us, but it just keeps on storing on our body. If they beat us, their strength will get a lot stronger. This is why every monster that attacks us is carnivorous. I am not sure if they will attack in this exact place the next time, but if they do start appearing one by one, then it will be another massacre. The only reason why we survived is because of you. Those goblins were too weak in front of you. But, not everyone is protected by the heroes, so tell UMA to keep an eye on their next move. Brian stared at Troy with a deeply serious expression and spoke. His words turned Troy silent. He didn't expect the situation to get this worse, and it got worse under Ye's of UMA. He was so ashamed that he didn't even know what to say. Well, that should be enough for now. And tell the director of the tech department to stop Project IT. There is no need to waste resources if our enemy is going to play smarter. Brian stood up and walked away while Charlotte hurriedly followed him. She looked back at Troy to see his expression. As she expected, he wanted to ask something, but he just kept his mouth shut. 0. Ely, let's go. Brian called out as they walked near Ely, Lily, and Peggy. She was playing with them. Hearing his words, Ely put down her lower lip with a teary expression. She obviously didn't want to go, especially now when she got a chance to make a new friend and play together. You can play with her in school. But, we need to return back, don't we? Brian sighed and spoke with a gentle smile on his face. He was trying to forget everything that happened just now. Wow, Uncle, Ely is coming to my school. Lily opened her cute eyes wide and asked. Brian was a little shocked when he heard her calling Ely. He even checked Ely's reaction and she didn't seem bothered by it at all. It truly surprised him. He smiled and said, of course, she also needs to study, and being a friend with you seems more interesting than going home. Isn't that right, Ely? Ely was surprised. She raised both of her hands and jumped. Hooray! I can go to school. Oh. Did you hear that, Lily? I can also go to school. We can play the whole day together. Ah. Ouch, Daddy, let go of my ears. It hurts. Brian caught her ear and smiled at Lily. Take care of my daughter at school and also scold her to study hard, all right. I will do my best, Uncle. Hearing Uncle made him a little uncomfortable, but he still smiled and held Ely's hand as they walked away. Daddy, why did you pinch my ears? It hurts. Ely pouted while looking angry. She was kicking on the ground as they walked. Ely, you don't go to school to play all day. You go to make friends and study with them. Brian shook his head and tried to convince her, but Daddy, I already know everything that a child is supposed to know. I even know a lot about teenager studies. Mother taught me everything. I don't need to go to school to learn all that. Ely stubbornly refused him and looked away while pouting. How about this? I will give you a project that you must complete within 2 years. If you can do it, then I won't force you to study. But, if you can't, then you have to study every course that school teaches you. Brian puts his hand on his chin and asked. Hearing this, both Charlotte and Ely got curious about the project. Is it going to be hard, Daddy? Ely asked with a little bit of suspicion in her eyes. She didn't want to bet something if she can't win. After all, she can easily manage her marks in exams and she can play all day if she wants as long as her daddy doesn't get a word. Brian opened his palm and a virtual projection appeared on his palm from his sunglasses. This is Lily. She is an AI. I created. Unlike other AI, she can do almost anything on her own as long as it doesn't break her core codes. She is capable of taking her own decision in the blink of an eye, counting over billions of possibilities. Of course, it is not her processing power that is impressive. It's her human mind. Those billions of possibilities come from the human perspective. It's like billions of alternate decisions that we can take and she can process it all at once to find a correct but not perfect decision. So, I want you to create an AI like her in 2 years. You don't have to make perfect like her, but if you can reach even 20% of what she could do, then you win. What do you think? You already know how to code. All I am asking you is to develop an AI. Hearing his project, both Charlotte and Ely opened their mouth and their eyes widened. Brian, this is. Charlotte immediately tried to change the project but Brian stopped her. He looked at his daughter and said, of course, if you don't think you can do such a simple task, then you can give up. Hearing his provocation, Ely clenched her fists and asked, how long did it take you to create her? If you are talking about current her, then I would say it took me nearly 10 years. That's why I said, if you can make 20% of it, then I will let you win. Brian smirked and answered without hesitation. Ely hesitated for a while and finally raised her hand. Deal. Hee hee. Good luck, daughter. This is going to be hard. Brian giggled as he fist-bumped his daughter. Then, he turned around and saw Charlotte sighing heavily. You don't like the idea. You are probably the first father to ask his 8-year-old daughter to create a world-class AI. I don't even know how to process this in my brain. Charlotte sighed as she put her head on his shoulder. Hey, that's not fair. Why are you putting your head on my daddy's shoulder? Go away from him. This time Ely didn't sit down. She raged up and tried to push Charlotte away. You can always climb in my arms. And, she has fought a lot today. Let her rest. Brian pulled Ely into his arms and tried to calm their relationship. Humph. Even if she is tried, only mommy is allowed to use that shoulder. Ely pouted and looked away. Not if she is going to stay there forever, Charlotte smirked and mumbled, but her voice was loud enough for Ely to hear. All right. All right, let's not fight. We still have somewhere else to go, don't we? Brian immediately stopped their conflict, reminding them of the restaurant. Oh, because of the battle, Charlotte's clothes were torn a bit and Brian's clothes were dirty due to the electric shock and dust. As for Ely, only she was completely fine. Maybe we should go somewhere less fancy, Charlotte suggested as she remembered the condition of her clothes. Ely didn't speak on this. If it was just Charlotte then she would have said something, but her daddy has also gotten dirty. But she did get a little sad. Then, how about this? Let's go and change into new clothes. And then go to the fancy hotel. Unlike reading a person, he was quite good at reading the environment. Of course, he was good at reading people, but he got worse later on. Really, Daddy? Ely looked at her daddy with a surprised expression and asked. Of course, yes. Let's go. Chapter 27. Why did Daddy try to hide his emotions for 5 years? You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is not fun at all. Ely grumpily puts away her plate and shouts at Brian and Charlotte. What do you mean? Isn't this what you wanted? Brian looked at her strangely and asked. Of course, I wanted to have a meal with you but not her. And, how can you feed each other, completely ignoring me? Ely puts her hands on her waist and turns around. Come on, Ely. How is it possible for me to ignore my cute little daughter? I just thought you would want to eat more so I didn't disturb you. Brian awkwardly smiled when he realized that he was getting too close to Charlotte in front of Ely. For now, he isn't planning to tell her anything, so he is trying to make it as less suspicious as he could. But, this is their first date. And, also the first dinner in a fancy restaurant. He didn't want to miss this opportunity to be close to her as well. Brian wasn't a social person, but he wasn't an idiot. He knows what he must do when he accepts the responsibilities properly. Hate to break it to you, Ely, but tomorrow, you would need to accept me as your mother if you want to get accepted at Royal Academy, Charlotte smirked and spoke while looking at Ely. Never. Ely smashed her palm on the table and shouted. This time everyone around them heard and turned around. This got her embarrassed as she puts her hands down. Sorry. Brian apologized to everyone and then looked at Ely. Each table was at a distance of 5 to 10 meters. But, he still kept his voice low and said. Ely, if you want to join the academy, if you want to say that I am your dad, you got to accept her soon. Remember, your mother isn't here. I don't want to start on her at this moment, but if you really want to live a life with me, you got to accept some things. Royal Academy won't let anyone without both of their parents join. Lily studies at the same academy. And not just her, some of the top superhero children study there as well. Your identity inside the school will no longer be Eleanor Bathory. Your name will be Eleanor Jackson and your mother's name will be Charlotte Jackson. 0. Of course, if you don't want to study there. If you don't want to meet Lily again, then you don't have to do any of this. You can either stay with your new friends in the school or live with Charlotte in the house. You are a smart girl. You can choose for yourself. Hearing his words, Ely didn't speak. She clenched her fist and jumped out of the chair. I will be back soon. Seeing her leave, they didn't stop her. Charlotte looked at Brian and asked, Isn't this a little too fast? She only met you yesterday. I know, but she has to accept this. Brian sighed and looked at her back. She isn't a normal child and she can understand what a child of her age can't. Look, I can't accept her mother. I don't love her and it would be impossible for me to just replace you with her just for the sake of my daughter. I know she has her own responsibilities, her own problems, but who doesn't? I had my own problems. I hated vampires until 2 years ago. I still hate vampires to a certain extent. So, how can I love vampires by replacing a person who has loved me for 8 years? When he said that, Charlotte's eyes widened and a blush appeared on her face. Why, that you knew? Brian rolled his eyes and said, I am not an idiot or completely dense. This is the reason why I am so comfortable and close to you even though it is just a single day. Oh. Slowly, he lowered his head and muttered, I was just trying to escape from you. I was trying to escape from her. I was trying to escape from relationships. But you made me realize no matter how fast a person can be, he can never outrun his true feelings. I am a genius. I could know she was the reason I fall unconscious each month if I wanted to. I knew you had feelings for me. But, I had something different in my mind. I wanted strength. I wanted to take revenge for my parents. That's why I joined UMA to forge my own path. That's why I left UMA after forging my path. That's why I isolated myself, but during my 2 years of life at UMA, I encountered a strange incident. This incident changed my life and also how I perceived vampires. I understood that not all vampires are bad. And, I understood how much a father truly loves his children. I couldn't imagine the self-control a top-level vampire would need to kneel in front of a human to save his child. And, when I saw her yesterday, I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel happiness. I felt guilt. I felt terrible as a father. And, that's why I decided to open my heart to you. Because if there is a single girl in this world who is willing to take care of my daughter while not being her mother, then it's you. When he said that, he finally raised his head and saw tears falling down her cheeks. Just when he tried to move, she shook her head quickly and wiped away her tears. She looked at him and said, I am glad that you liked me back. She didn't say anything else. She just smiled at him and that smile was enough to tell everything. She could feel his thirst for strength and the guilt as a father. Both of them smiled at each other and continued with their meal while Ely returned after a while. She looked at Brian and said, I will go to school. That's great. Brian cheered up with a big smile, but Ely wasn't done there. She pointed her finger at Charlotte and said, I might accept her as my mother in a name for the outside world, but she will never be my mother. Hearing her words, Brian and Charlotte bitterly smiled. They knew this was going to be hard. Brian didn't want to make her sad, and now Charlotte was even more responsible to take care of Ely. All right. All right, but you might change your mind in the future. Charlotte looked at her and smiled. Never. Ely went back to her seat and started eating. They finished their meal, paid the bill, and finally left the hotel. They didn't take the train but rather took a subway taxi. It costs nearly 10 times the train, but now Brian doesn't care about spending his money. He cares only about making Ely happy. After they reached home, it was already night, so Ely and Charlotte went directly to the bed while Brian went to the VR pod. He still had to level up the entire night. After entering the VP pod, he pressed the button and spoke. Enter new gods. The next moment, his consciousness was inside his avatar that appeared in the middle of the town. He looked around and saw a bunch of players and NPCs moving around. Status. Name. Dragon Rider 97 race. Human level. 5 HP, 30/30ths, cursed. 90% stamina, MP 21/30ths XP. 600/640 class. Warlock STR 30/AGI. 30/Vit. 30 STM. 30/Int. 30/Magic. 10, Warlock, active abilities, Warlock. Cursed Hands, LV.1, Passive Abilities, Warlock. Mental Fortitude, LV.1, Skills. Dragon Rider 97 Sword Art, LV.1, Shadow Escape, LV.1, Slaughtering Crows, LV.1, SP, 25 God's Coin. 327 Inventory. Boar Bones, 2 picks, Mana Restoration Potion, 10, Poison Sac, Token for Sub-Class, Healing Potions, 5, I guess, it's time to level up. Brian smirked and dashed out of the town. But before leaving, he bought 2 swords, spending 40 God's coins. Only then, he leave. His goal was none other than the forest. And, he had plans for taking any quest at this moment. He just wanted to level up and at least become rank 1 superhero tonight. After he reached the forest, he suddenly noticed a strange thing. As he ran deeper, he didn't find a single monster. What happened? Did some kind of glitch appear on the server? But, I thought I had developed a backup system just in case. Suddenly, his eyes shrunk. He looked around and thought. No, wait. James told me that there was going to be a mega dungeon. Don't tell me that they included all of those monsters into that mega dungeon. Wait, I need to call him. Oh, Brian immediately clicked on the menu and a bunch of different options appeared. Then, he clicked on the friend list and nearly 9 names appeared. Thankfully I saved James' number into my personal account. New Gods registers a player's personal account as well, and through it, he can search and add his friends. This way he can immediately contact his friend even without scanning it. James Tucker. Brave soul, online, that's good. Let's contact him. Saying so, he clicked on his name icon. Chapter 28 Daddy got the bad premonition. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ring. Ring. Ha. Brian is actually calling me. Wait, Dragon Rider 97. What the hell? He is the one who created the skill. A 10-foot-tall man opened his eyes wide and muttered. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He was none other than James. Seeing his friend calling him, he got excited, but after seeing that friend was none other than Dragon Rider 97, he got frightened and speechless. Hey brave soul, we need defense. Hurry up. A man holding a sword shouted while looking at a giant 20-foot-tall moving tree. There were 6 others who were trying to attack the tree, but with its dozens of branches stretching out, it was difficult to strike a hit. James looked at his team and declined the call. Taint, let's make this quick. James ran towards the tree while taking out a giant circular shield from his inventory. James went straight towards the giant tree that saw him coming and stretched out a sharp branch. Crink. The branch collided with his shield and tried to push him away, but with the strength of a giant, he didn't even move an inch. Whoosh. 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 Crink. 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 When James blocked its attack, the tree shot a few more towards him, but none of them passed through his shield. Guys, now. 0. James shouted. Taint, the leader of this party, rushed towards the tree with his sword. His mana erupted out and coated his sword. Sword of Fire Demon Atharog. Clack. His sword made a power cut in the tree while leaving the flames on it. Class ability. Giant Firebird. Oh, caw. The tree tried to remove the flames, but one of the mages from their group shot a huge bird made out of flames. Her mage class gave her Firebird ability, which was pretty cool. The tree shot dozens of branches towards the Firebird, but they only pierced it and got burned by it. As soon as the Firebird collided with a tree, it started burning. At the same time, another man from the side swings 2 chain hammers and struck the tree with his full power. Ha! James pushed back the branches and dashed away from the tree. At this moment, the last partner of their group walked towards the tree. He was wearing a yellow shawl. His head was completely bald as well. At this moment, the tree was in bad condition. Its stem was covered in flames and its branches were broken by the chain hammer. It was trying to recover but it wasn't working for it. The monk walked straight while chanting a few words, "Oh." He raised his hand and his palm faced the tree. He took a deep breath and the mana flowed out of his body at an immense speed and quantity. All of that man condensed at his palm and the next moment, mana came out of his palm. Class ability. Tathagata Palm. Bang! The mana transformed into a magical palm that was nearly the same size as his own body. It went straight towards the tree and collided with it. The palm destroyed its stem and branches without destroying the flames. When the tree couldn't heal itself and the flames completely burned it out. Guys, it still feels so weird to spell that out. The monk turns around and adjusts his mouth. Party Peerless Warrior killed Tree Demon Leader LV.10, your rewards have been allocated and distributed to your inventory. Nice. I finally got enough EXP to reach level 10. Now, we can go even deeper. Taint spoke excitedly while putting his sword inside the sheath. Guys, I have to do something. Can you guys continue without me for a while? James opened his status panel and asked while looking a little unnatural. BDNVL.M Taint and others looked at each other. Brave soul, we are a team, right? Taint looked at him and asked. Yeah, we are. James slightly frowned but still replied. So, are you just going to leave now? We plan to grind monster the entire night, remember? You can't just leave now. Taint answered with a serious look on his face. I know I promised you. And, I really don't want to leave and I am not even sure if I will be gone for more than 5 minutes. I will definitely return as soon as possible. Don't worry, it's just a call. James smiled and tried to calm them down while moving away from them. He isn't planning to return soon, is he? The monk looked at Taint and asked. Well, he said that he will return after taking this call. Maybe it's some sort of secret call. Let's just wait for a few minutes and recuperate while he returns. The mage suggested while sitting on the stone nearby. Alright. Let's wait for a while. Taint gave James's path a deep stare and nodded his head. On another side, dude, what happened? Why did you call me all of a sudden? James asked in front of the status panel which showed Brain's ID. I had something to ask. Did the mega dungeon start already? Brian's voice rang from the status panel. Don't tell me that you didn't know this. It was announced in the morning. For some unknown reason, UMA decided to launch the mega dungeon today. And, don't worry if you are under level 10. Even if you are under level 10, you can still participate. By the way, are you in a group? If you are not, then you can join us. James asked with a lot of enthusiasm in his tone. Hearing his words, Brian paused for a moment and said, I don't think I can go with you right now. By the way, there is something that I wanted to tell you tomorrow. Can you drop by? You never really call unless it is something that you don't know. And, there are very few things that you don't know. You didn't know about this announcement. Are you in some kind of problem? James asked with a serious voice. Stop being so much of a detective. I have no problem. Just drop by my home tomorrow. I have something to tell you. By the way, have you contacted Barry? Brian asked. Nope. He seems to be even busier than before. I guess you got really lucky by leaving UMA 2 years ago. James answered. Alright then. I will tell him to visit whenever he returns home. By the way, I have also finished building up the device you told me about. But, why would you need something to control your rage? From someone who knows you for years, I have never seen you angry. Brian asked. Wait, don't tell me you aren't going through this. James asked. Going through what? Brian asked with confusion. First, his closest friend asked him to build something for him that he didn't need, and now he is talking about something he didn't understand. I guess it is happening in a different sense. Anyway, I will drop by tomorrow. For now, I need to go back. Bye. Saying so, James cuts off the call and looks up into the sky. It was the night time, but everywhere it was bright due to artificial lights. James clenched his fist and thought, he isn't feeling it. Maybe he isn't what I am. Anyway, Brian, I hope you have built a complete device. I don't know what's going to happen, but I found the clue that I have to control my anger from the moment I turn 20.5. You are one of the smartest people on the earth, Brian. It must work, otherwise I don't know what's going to happen. James sighed and finally dashed towards his team. On another side of the forest, Brian was dumbfounded by how fast James cut off the call. Something is wrong with him. He isn't acting like before, as if he is afraid of getting angry. But, why? Why would he be afraid of getting angry? He won't turn into an angry monster, would he? Brian chuckles and shook his head. Anyway, I have completed the task he gave me, and since tomorrow is his birthday as well, it will be a gift from me. And, I also need to tell him about Ely and Char. It's pity that Barry is still in UMA. I don't want to tell something like this to him on a phone. Man, our technology has gone so far, but it still feels to share good news face to face. By the way, why did they suddenly launch the Mega Dungeon? Thinking so, his face slowly turned solemn as he thought more. Mega Dungeons are made as a boost for humanity. It gives the humans a chance to improve from level 10 to 20 in 1 or 2 days. Not only did they launch it beforehand, but also changed the restriction. No. Vampires and werewolves won't allow this in any case. This will definitely shift the balance. But since they did it anyway, this means they got bigger trouble on their plate. Brian frowned and looked at the sky as his eyes shrunk. Don't tell me the second wave is coming soon. I am getting a bad premonition about this. Chapter 29 Daddy continuously levels up Part 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Anyway, I need to level up if I really want to face the future problem. I should probably move solo. Although risks are greater, the return is even higher. But first, where is that Mega Dungeon? Brian looked at his menu and tried to find the news about Mega Dungeon. On the sideline, there was a news section. He clicked on it and dozens of different screen panels appeared in front of him. The different panels had different headlines. He skipped other panels and searched for the Mega Dungeon. It wasn't hard to find it since it was the hottest topic. It was on the top. He clicked it and a new panel appeared with lots of different images and a small map on it. Oh, he clicked on the map and a new option appeared. Would you like to install the map? Yes, no. Brian quickly clicked on yes, and the next moment a new panel appeared. It was a map of this forest. Well, I guess having a map wouldn't be a problem. But Brian quickly stared at the new status at the side. God's coin. 267, it costs me 20 coins just to download the map. Anyway, now that I have the map, I need to find the Mega Dungeon. If I remember correctly, the head designed this kind of dungeon with the purpose of keeping all of the monsters at a single dungeon with levels. As a level 5, I should be able to earn a lot of XP through this dungeon. Brian closed other panels and focused solely on the map. The map showed the entire forest and lots of different icons that represented something. There was a castle icon that represented the Mega Dungeon. Then, there was a green circle that represented the town. There were other icons, but his eyes were solely focused on the Mega Dungeon. It's on the far south of this forest. It shouldn't take me more than 10 minutes to reach there. Brian turned to the south and started running. His foot movement was quite fast, but it wasn't his maximum running speed. After 12 minutes he finally reached in front of the castle just as he predicted. The castle was massive and there were lots of people around. He didn't find anyone he knew. So, he simply walked near the gate of the castle. The gate was made out of wood and it was quite big as well. As he approached the gate, a panel appeared in front of him. Solo, Party, 0. Brian clicked on Solo, then another panel appeared in front of him. Player LV.5 can start from the 3rd floor. Would you like to start from the 3rd floor? Yes, no. Brian clicked on no, and the next moment, his figure disintegrated into blue light and appeared inside the castle. As he appeared, he looked around and saw a finely crafted room. There was nothing inside, but the designs of the walls were unique with strange textures on them. It was a triangle, but triangles stacked upon each other to fill the room completely. Floor quest activated. Quest number 1. Defeat 5 fire-breathing lizards. Reward 500 XP, 50 gods coins, and 2 healing potions. Punishment: death and kicked out of the dungeon. I guess this isn't going to be that easy. Brian clenched his fists as he looked around him. But, a few seconds later, blue illuminated in front of him, and the particles of the blue light formed 5 big lizards. They were nearly a meter long and half a meter tall. Roar! As soon as they saw Brian, they opened their mouths and 5 powerful streams of fire dashed toward them. Brian quickly retreated dozens of meters away. As he retreated, he realized that the ground was getting hot just from their fire alone. TCH. Did they make these lizards overpowered? Brian clicked his tongue and dodged to the side. The lizards didn't follow his movement and kept spraying their flames straight. So, they can only attack straight, huh? Oh. Brian immediately rushed towards the side. From the side, he rushed towards those lizards. Until he reached nearly 2 meters near them, nothing happened. But just when he stepped on that radar, they instantly turned their heads as the flame followed. Damn! Brian knew fighting those flames head-on wouldn't be a good choice. He jumped up in the air as their heads returned back to their original positions. Brian retreated as soon as he landed on the ground and thought. It seems this is made for a group rather than a solo. But still, I can do it. Brian quickly released his mana into his hands and focused on one of the lizards. Among 5, the one he could hit was the one in front of him and the others were next to him. Wait, if I go back, would they attack me? Brian kept his mana in check for a moment and thought. He dashed behind them, and just when he reached there, those lizards stopped their flames and instantly turned around. Seeing this, Brian immediately used Shadow Escape and dashed back to the side. Well, I hope it will work. Thankfully, I brought the sword this time. This is just a 1st floor. I shouldn't use my full powers. Brian said to himself and released his magic. His physical strength boosted to another level and the remaining mana condensed at his blade. Whoosh! Splash! The next moment, he dashed towards them and sliced their heads with his sword before all of them could turn their heads completely. Because they were already facing back, before the last one could turn around completely, its head was already on the ground. You killed LV.2 fire lizards, you received 50 EXP, your EXP bank is full. You level up, you received 5 SP, you received the quest rewards. Status. As soon as he leveled up, his HP and MP recovered but not his stamina. Thankfully, he hadn't spent a lot of stamina on the 1st floor, but the curse is still there. Name: Dragon Rider 97 race. Human level 6 HP 35/35, cursed. 90% stamina, MP 35/35 XP. 510/1280 class. Warlock STR 35/AGI. 35/Vit. 35 STM. 35/Int. 35/Magic. 10. Warlock, active abilities, Warlock. Cursed Hands, LV.1, passive abilities, Warlock. Mental Fortitude, LV.1, skills. Dragon Rider 97 Sword Art, LV.1, Shadow Escape, LV.1, Slaughtering Crows, LV.1, SP, 30 God's Coin. 337 Inventory. Boar Bones, 2 picks, Mana Restoration Potion, 10, Poison Sac, Token for Sub-Class, Swords, 2, Healing Potions, 7, use 10 SP in Magic and 10 SP in Intelligence. Brian changed the stats and increased Intelligence as well as Magic. Now, my mana will recover at 30 seconds per mana and my control over Magic has certainly increased. Now, I can try that second move that I planned. Brian thought to himself as he clicked on the panel that appeared in front of him. Floor 1 has been cleared, would you like to enter floor 2? Yes, no. After clicking yes, his body disappeared from floor 1 and appeared on floor 2, which was no different than before. After his arrival, his enemies also appeared. 10 wolves. All level 5. Floor quest activated, quest number 2. Defeat 10 wind wolves reward. 1000 XP, 100 God's coins, and 4 healing potions. Punishment. Death and kicked out of the dungeon, Brian smirked and took out both of his swords. His mana burst out and condensed on his swords. Grr. Tap. 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 Seeing the overwhelming mana, those wolves instantly dashed towards him. As they moved, their bodies were covered with the invisible wind. It was blowing too fast and increasing their speed. Shadow Escape. His body also moved like a shadow and blurred in front of them. He touched the hilt of swords against each other and held them tight. The moment he reached near them, he struck his foot on the ground and lifted himself. He spun his body and the sword swung with him. The mana condensed in his sword and left the sharp projectile in its previous position as it spun. His body went straight between the wolves while his sword slashed 5 of them. Whoosh! Splash! 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 5 wolves fell to the ground with their neck being split from their bodies. Not a single part except for the neck was touched by the sword. Dragon Rider 97 Sword Art, Second Stance. Stealth Dragon Claws. This move was something he learned from that bandit. Although he doesn't have a silent stat, he doesn't need it. He just needs a perfect precision to strike, just like how the bandit stole his girlfriend's purse. That's why even though his swords left sharp mana projectile while spinning, they didn't strike them. As soon as 5 of them fell down, those wolves turned around and roared at Brian. All 5 of them summoned a powerful wind around them and the wind merged together, forming a massive tornado. Tornado, huh? Let's see which one of us has a stronger one. Brian smirked and tightly held both of his swords. Although they were level 5, they weren't that strong in his eyes. Not to mention, he was now planning to use one of his devastating attacks. Shadow Escape. Using this move once again, his body dashed towards the wolves as he spun himself. The mana condensed at his arm boosted his physical strength and slowly he began to conjure wind around him. Dragon Rider 97 Sword Art, First Stance. Dragon Twister, bang. 2 tornadoes struck each other and the bodies of the dead wolves got blown away. Chapter 30 Daddy continuously levels up Part 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As 2 tornadoes collided, Brian kept pushing his tornado and eventually devoured their tornado. While he was controlling it, they just released it and couldn't control it. So as soon as his tornado got bigger, those wolves couldn't stay on the ground anymore. All of them were sucked inside the tornado. While inside the tornado, the sword started slicing their bodies. Thud. 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 Their bodies fell to the ground as the tornado slowly dissipated. Well, these monsters couldn't control their tornado or else it would have been much more difficult. You killed LV.5 wind wolves, you received 250 EXP, you received the quest rewards, your EXP bank is full, you level up, you received 5 SP, status. Name. Dragon Rider 97 race. Human level. 7 HP, 40/40ths, cursed. 90% stamina, MP 40/40 XP. 480/2560 class. Warlock, 0. STR 40/AGI. 40/VIT. 40 STM. 40/int. 40/magic. 20, Warlock, active abilities, Warlock. Cursed Hands, LV.1, passive abilities, Warlock. Mental Fortitude, LV.1, skills. Dragon Rider 97 Sword Art, LV.1, Shadow Escape, LV.1, Slaughtering Crows, LV.1, SP, 15 God's Coin. 387 Inventory. Boar Bones, 2 picks, Mana Restoration Potion, 10, Poison Sac, token for sub-class, Swords, 2, Healing Potions, 11, this is nice. But, the next level is going to be difficult. Hopefully, it won't be a level 10 monster. Floor 2 has been cleared, would you like to enter floor 3? Yes, no, after clicking yes, his body disappeared from floor 1 and appeared on the floor there, which was different than before. Unlike before, it was more like a jungle inside a room. Because this jungle was smaller than any other jungles he has ever seen. He knew this will just get bigger slowly. After his arrival, his enemies also appeared. 10 brown bears. All level 10. Floor quest activated, oh. Quest no. 3, defeat 10 iron fur bears reward. 2000 XP, 200 God's coins, basic skill coupon, and 8 healing potions. Punishment. Death and kicked out of the dungeon, F***CK. Seeing those bears and their level induction above their heads, Brian slapped his face in distress. He was simply just kidding, but no, they truly arrived. And, how the hell was I supposed to defeat them in level 5? Did they break this game after I left? Brian shouted in dissatisfaction, but his dissatisfaction only made the bears dash towards him. Oh, **T. Brian instantly turned around and used Shadow Escape to get out of their path. Bears are bulky, strong, and incredibly durable. But, their speed isn't actually that fast. I can use this to my advantage and strike. Brian looked at the group of bears and targeted one who was near him. The bears were still facing another way, so he instantly used Shadow Escape to appear behind that bear and slammed his sword on that body. Ding! But when he hit the bear, it released the sparks as if 2 metals collided. I'm foo **Ked. Oh, roar. The bear turned around and roared at him. His roar was so strong that blew his hair. Sorry for that surprise attack, brother. Now, how about you let me run away and prepare another strategy to defeat you? Brian gave the bear a big smile, but the bear shook his head and slapped Brian's body. Bang! Thud! Brian flew out and collided against the wall before falling to the ground. 0.3 HP, damn. Iron skin. Seriously. Which moron decided to add iron skin to a level 10 bear? Someone inside the UMA headquarters, achoo. Did you catch a cold, Barry? A man wearing a blue shirt patted another man in jeans and asked. No. I feel like some hot model from the high school remembered me. The man in the jeans looked a lot younger than the man wearing a blue shirt. He was Brian's friend Barry from the high school and also his colleague who joined 1 year after Brian. Pity that you can't go out much. You are wasting your time here. The man wearing a blue shirt sighed and started doing his own job. You know what? You are absolutely right. I need to take a break. After this mega dungeon, I am going to ask for a break. Barry nodded his head and spoke. Is that so, Barry? If you don't mind, I would like to come with you. Another colleague of his spoke. This colleague was a girl and nearly of his age as well. She was not just beautiful but also had a slender body and long legs. You know, Sophie, you don't need to wait for me to take the break. Barry cleared his throat and spoke with a little unnatural tone. What are you saying? Sophie moved her chair near him and got incredibly close to his ear and whispered. I will go everywhere you go. Ahem. Can you not flirt at the work, Sophie? The man in the blue shirt cleared his throat and asked. Are you jealous, John? Sophie opened her mouth and walked out of her seat. As she got near him, she once again puts her arm around him and says, I can always flirt with you. Come on, stop it. We need to develop the few last stages of the mega dungeon. I really don't know why Head suddenly dumped this new stage to us, but we need to get it done in time. Suddenly, a man a little far from them stood up and shouted. Then, he looked at Barry. Barry, are you sure leaving level 10 bear with iron skin on the 3rd floor is a good idea? If they can't cross it, they will die. And instead of producing more rankers, the potential will decrease even more. Don't worry, Vice Director. Although they have an incredible defense, they also have an incredible weakness that a person can easily use if he is calm and collected enough. This will prevent those with hot mind to level up as well. We don't want troublemakers as the rankers, do we? Barry answered with confidence in his tone. Alright, I believe in you. The vice director nodded his head and sat on his seat. Inside the game, Brian slowly got up from the ground and stared at the bears with confusion. He saw them ignoring him and resting on the floor. This surprised him for a moment. I still have healing potions, right? He got a theory in his mind. And, if it works, then he exactly knows how to defeat these bears, but because he isn't sure whether his theory is true or not, he needed to test it first. He walked up to the bear and pierced its skin. This time the bear once again slammed him away, but then, it just kept resting. His sword couldn't pierce its skin, and that means the bear has nothing to worry about. So, that's how it is. As the quest suggests, I just have to defeat these bears. I don't have to kill them. If I can't kill them now, I could still improve as long as I level up. And, I will also get the skill which might become the key to killing them. Now the question still remains. How do I defeat them in the simplest way? Brian looks around for a moment thinking of the idea to defeat them, but nothing comes to his mind. But, a few minutes later, he notices something. All of those bears were sitting very close to each other, and they were also very lazy. More importantly, he was in the middle of the forest. Brian smiled and rushed towards the trees. Although this was a forest, it was small. Fortunately, he succeeded in finding a few small animals. He caught a rabbit and boar, and even found a few fish. After that, he started digging a big hole. Because they were too big, he had to make a massive hole. Fortunately, he knew how massive. It took him nearly 2 hours. After digging the hole, he covered the hole. He killed those animals and started a fire. After cleaning those animals, he roasted them until their smell reached those bears. As soon as they smelled it, they immediately stood up and rushed towards him. Seeing this, Brian hurriedly took those foods and kept them on the cover. Thud. A few seconds later, the entire ground shook vibrantly as those bears got trapped inside the door. It must be Barry's idea. He gave them overpowered ability but also gave them extreme laziness and ignorance. With the help of 0.point energy, it evolved and made them even more lazy and strong. Well, thanks to that I completed my quest, right? Just as he asked himself, a panel appeared in front of you. You received the quest rewards. Wait, I still need 120 XP to level up, right? Open basic skill coupon. You received a basic skill. Thunderbolt. Skill. Thunderbolt type. Magic mana consumption. 5 description. This basic skill transforms the player's mana into a bolt of lightning and strikes his enemy. The closer the distance, the more damage it can cause. Nice. Wait, lightning affects metal. Brian's mouth opened wide. He completely ignored the floor ascendance panel in front of him and grinned. He pointed his finger at the hole and his mana burst out in his finger, slowly charring like the lightning. Thunderbolt. Bang.